Okay, guys, so I'm going to tell you a story about a very specific day in my rehab journey. And as I tell it, as I think about it, I can remember all the details. Like, we were living in a big circular room, and so most people had a roommate. And it was kind of like there was 7 or 8 rooms around the circle, and you had 2 washrooms, and then you had your room that you usually shared with someone. And the nursing desk was at the front. There was always a nurse on duty, and then the psychiatrist's office, the doctor's office were off to the side. And in the facility, whenever you left that area where your stuff was, where your personal belongings were, you would sign out and then sign back in. And so we had to do this whenever we left and whenever we arrived. So we would arrive at a new spot and sign in there as well. And usually there was a door that had to be unlocked. Like, it was a bit of a lockdown, right? Like a bit of a very controlled setting. And I remember one day we had group therapy, and there was a girl who had been in the rehab with me for about 2 weeks. And in the group therapy sessions, she had never really shared. She had never really engaged. She had surface level commented or surface level said a couple things about herself, but never opened up. And I can still remember a new girl arriving in rehab. So 2 weeks in, a new girl arrives, and this new girl was actually an addictions counselor. And this girl had a great personality. She was one of the people that I actually followed up with after rehab. And she came to group therapy, and she was extroverted like me. And she started sharing about her experiences. And her experience was with bulimia. Okay? And so she shared how that eating disorder had been affecting her addictions and affecting her life. And you could see in the group how other people were responding to her sharing and her being vulnerable. And one of the people responding was the girl who was anorexic. And now the girl who was anorexic was the quiet girl. So the girl who was quiet for 2 weeks struggled with anorexia. But the new girl who was extroverted had bulimia. And so the bulimic girl, I don't like that description, but the girl with bulimia shared about her struggle. And then the girl with anorexia started to open up. Okay? And she started to open up for the first time I had ever seen her open up. And she almost was engaged because she was starting to relate to the girl with bulimia. So it's almost as if throughout her 2 weeks, she hadn't seen herself in the other people who were in the program, right? And so I'll never forget this. She started to share, and then the bulimic girl, the girl with bulimia, sorry, I don't like that, but the girl with bulimia upped it a bit and started to share more and connect with the girl who had anorexia. But then an obvious thing happened. The girl with anorexia saw the differences in her story compared to the bulimic girl's story and shut down in group therapy. Like, shut down, angry, you're not the same as me. I forget her exact words, but she was almost angry at the girl who had bulimia trying to overconnect with her in her perception. And how this works is we have these group therapy sessions every day, and then 2 times a week or 3 times a week, you have a one-on-one with the psychologists, with the counselors. And I remember in one of my one-on-ones, the counselor telling me, "Hey, Mike, in group therapy, it feels like you've been holding back a little bit." You know, so I was talking to her. I'm like, well, I saw what happened. Like, basically, the girl who never shares started connecting with the story of the new girl who struggles with bulimia, connects it to her anorexia, and then realizes she's connecting and being vulnerable and immediately shuts down. And I'm like, I see that. And so this was Beth the psychologist. Great. Beth the Great. And so Beth says to me, like, Mike, why aren't you saying something? So she challenged me, right? She challenged me to speak out. And so I did. And I remember telling them, like, the next group therapy, because it came up again with a bit of a tension between the two, where the girl with anorexia was just not having, like, there's no connection between us, like, you have a different disorder than me. And so I spoke up and just said, hey, like, you were sharing and connecting, and then you shut down, and you're not allowing yourself to see the similarities between you and the other girl. And so I was like, listen, I have type 1 diabetes, and what that means is I have a disordered relationship with food too, right? I take insulin, and sometimes I gobble the food down because it's so much work to figure out the carbs, and it's so much work to figure out what insulin to take that it's not fun to eat. It's really, really not. And so I'm often either eating the wrong thing or not eating very much, or all these things. And so I brought this up to the two of them in the group therapy. And she connected a little bit. But the point of this story is that it gets back to allowing yourself to not be terminally unique. So terminal uniqueness is one of my favorite expressions I learned in rehab. And if you think that, like me, when I arrived in rehab, if I looked at the indigenous young guy that I keep talking about, and if I decided that, oh, if I had his circumstances, I never would have started dealing drugs or been part of a gang, like that was his decision, and other people wouldn't make that decision. If I took that stance, I wouldn't be sober today. Right? Because then that means that I wouldn't allow myself to connect to the help that's available in rehab or in meetings or in other people, because I would consider my problems and the way I deal with life to be unique. And unique is usually a good word, but in this sense, it's not. Because, as I've said before, right, my issues with addiction were substantially the same as everyone else in rehab, but accidentally different. So they were driven by events in their lives and struggles and mental health conditions that had completely different accidental circumstances than me. Different cities, different relationships, different ages, different sexes, different genders, different sexual orientations, right? But we all had a problem because substances were affecting our life. And so the girl struggling with anorexia, hopefully she was able to open up, and hopefully she's doing well now, but she saw an opportunity to not connect, right? So where do we take these opportunities to not connect in our lives? And this works beyond sobriety. This works in like seeing successful people at whatever you perceive their success to be, and thinking about how you're different than them instead of wondering if there's anything about you that's the same, right? I mean, look, is it likely you're going to be Elon Musk? Well, it's 100% unlikely, because no one has the same results as someone else. But are there things that Elon Musk has done that you could do, like commitment to an idea, hard work, and you may get better results in your life? And so that's the same thing here. It's like, if you know other people who have overcome something, maybe they know something that you don't. And even people who are willing to be vulnerable, right? Like because I was able to connect to all these people in rehab who also struggled with things, the group therapy was fucking dynamite. Because you would hear other people talking, and you would hear their limitations, right? So you would hear them talking about, well, it's just my family, right? I drink on it's going to be really hard because I've got these family holidays. And then we would give each other like suggestions. We'd ask permission to give each other suggestions. But when they were talking, if you were connected, you could realize that, oh, I'm thinking that way too, aren't I? Like, what ways am I limiting myself in my addiction journey? Like how am I allowing myself to use substances in the same way this other person is? And so terminal uniqueness again, right? Like, my problem is just so unique that I can't get help. So, and it speaks to vulnerability, right? Like, vulnerability isn't easy. And so, you go to group therapy, and the only way to benefit from it is to be almost literally 100% vulnerable, because it brings out something in someone else. So when the girl with bulimia was 100% vulnerable, it brought something out of the girl with anorexia. So even though she then shut down, it was still worth it in that moment that she opened up. I cannot tell you the value of rehab and the value of sitting in a group of people who all struggle with a very similar thing. And so if you're thinking about trying to overcome something in your life, get around people. Like, obviously, I don't mean if you're addicted to something, go hang out with your friends who are addicted. That's not at all what I mean. But if you're in a guided scenario where someone is an addictions counselor trying to help you all connect about how to get better, it's super valuable to be with people who also struggle like you struggle and can connect with you. And so that was a really, really memorable day in rehab. I never forgot that. And it also taught me the value of intuition. And I'm still learning this. And more recently, my intuition, I'm trusting myself. Because in that moment, I had like this Mike Walsh intuition of like, wait, I can visually see what's happening in this group. And I need to trust me, right? Trust myself, because I can add value. And the value is really for me realizing, wait, you have diabetes, Walsh. And all people who have anorexia and bulimia have a very similar struggle to you. Theirs is sometimes more immediately dangerous for them, and the treatment is different. But the message to me, right, let's get back to what I learned. The message to me was like, oh, other people struggle with food in a different way. They don't even have diabetes. And then learning to manage my diabetes is part of how I got sober. So, a lot of lessons there. Sober Walsh. We'll chat soon.